All right, folks. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Joe Amditis. I am rocking my Collaborate or Die paraphernalia today in honor of our amazing panel, or workshop, I should say, between two of the best to ever do it, Delaney Butler and Chris Rudisil. You are in the right place if you are here for project management for journalism collaborations. This is an opportunity to explore and improve your collaboration management skills during this webinar with Solutions Journalism Network. Before we get started, a few things to note in just a second. Oh, it's already recording. There we go. Before we get started, some tech stuff. We will leave the chat open. Just as some shade at people who don't do that, please leave your chat open. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please drop them in the chat. Make sure you're sending those messages to the right person and not in a private or public message if you don't mean to. If you have any issues or technical glitches, or if you can't hear or something, you can DM me. And I will do my best to help you behind the scenes. This will run for about an hour, I believe, and we will have time for questions at the end. I think we do have like a little 15-minute window till 3:15 if this is just a super good conversation and runs over. I expect that to be the case, but if not, you will receive a recording, a transcript, a meeting report and summary, and contact information, and any resources that are shared in the chat or by our guests today. You can always, as usual, find more information and guides and resources about collaborative journalism, as well as a list of our upcoming events and workshops at collaborativejournalism.org or centerforcooperativemedia.org. And I would urge you on collaborativejournalism.org to click that first link and sign up for the Collaborative Journalism newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks and is curated and produced by the wonderful Mariela Santos Muniz here from the center. So with that, yes, you will get a very well-formatted email. I pride myself on my formatting and bullet points. With that, I'm going to turn it over without further ado to our two speakers and leaders today, Delaney Butler and Chris Rudisil. Chris, Delaney, take it away, introduce yourselves, and let's get underway.
Great. So yeah, I am Delaney Butler. I'm here joined today by Chris Rudisil. I am one of the collaborative managers at the Solutions Journalism Network with our local media project team, a team that I'm super excited to have been with from the very beginning. All we do is collaboratives, so all collaboratives all the time for the last 5 years. Speaking of amazing collaboratives, I'm really excited to be joined today by Chris Rudisil.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Rudisil. Most of you know me from the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative, where I've been serving since 2020, I think. I've also been happy to work with the Delaware Journalism Collaborative, Solving Sacramento, and I think Sina's here today, and now working with the Local Media Project on supporting the Dallas Media Collaborative and other projects. So very excited to come in and help with this with Delaney. I was able to participate in this program during the Center for Cooperative Media's Collaborative Journalism Summit, and I just think it's a great opportunity for us to think together about collaborative journalism.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. So it's time for me to do the thing where I ask everyone if you can see my screen. So
Looks great. We can see it.
all right, and then let me just get it into. All right. Perfect. Cool. So this is, oh, no, come back. All right, great. Can everyone hear me? Someone give me a thumbs up. Great. Okay. Yep, so just a little bit more by way of introduction. As Chris mentioned, Leah Todd Lynn and I did this workshop at the Collaborative Summit in June in Washington, D.C. If you need some more Leah Todd Lynn in your life, she is co-leading a workshop all about impact with Amy Maestas, who is maybe here, one of our beloved team members, I think shortly after the new year. So when Leah and I kind of had the idea for this workshop, we were thinking about all of the things that we had learned about project management, about this role, about how collaboratives are managed, but also all of the things that collaborative project managers have learned and can learn from each other. So that was really the genesis of this workshop, we originally thought of it as a choose your own adventure, but as we'll get into when we get into logistics, it's sort of a twist on choose your own adventure. I also, I would be totally remiss if I did not shout out all of the project managers for our SJN local media project collaboratives, some of whom are here today, but some of whom could, be teaching this along with me and Chris. And they have been meeting consistently for the last few years in sort of an informal water cooler where they've been sharing their thoughts and fears and hopes and dreams and struggles. And this workshop would not exist without them. Also have to shout out the amazing collaboration managers call run by the Center for Cooperative Media. And also all of you, and I know there are some of you who fall into this category here with us today, all of you who are just doing this work, day in and day out and showing up to things like this in order to share what you're learning and learn with all of us. So this workshop literally would not exist without everyone, doing this work and contributing what they are learning. So just really excited to do some of that today. And then I am going to kick it over to Chris for a little bit about how today will work.
Great. So to start us off, I'd like you to take a moment of self-reflection, post in the chat where you see yourself in collaborative project management. So are you totally new, sort of familiar, or a total expert? Don't be shy, just a quick gut check on where you are starting from today. And I'm waiting to see those. Perfect. So as Delaney said, if you were at the Center for Cooperative Media's Collaborative Journalism Summit earlier this year, we went through quite a few different scenarios that you might face as a project manager. We won't have time to do all of those today, but Delaney and I have selected 3 specific scenarios that we found the most common when we spoke to collaborative project managers, or those that have some common elements in the problem-solving sectors of our PM brains. So we hope that you can tap into some of those skills today and leave a bit more prepared and confident with any issue that may arise. We also want you to think of all sides of an issue. Don't worry, there's something in each scenario for folks at every level of expertise. I'm seeing a good variety here. Here's a quick rundown of how things will go. Delaney and I are going to read through 3 individual scenarios, and for each one, we'll give you a list of potential paths to take. Joe is then going to send you off into break rooms where you'll have about 10 minutes to discuss with your fellow collaborators. Each room will be given a specific answer to discuss. Then we'll come back together and ask one person from each group to share their takeaways. So we'll need you to select a spokesperson. Remember, you might not get the answer that you would have immediately chosen, but there are no right or wrong solutions. So with each response, we want you to think about how that approach might fit within your collaborative's values and goals. Why is this the best approach for your collaborative, and what might be the outcomes? One thing all scenarios have in common: they embody a challenge that a collaborative had to overcome. So are we ready? Delaney, anything you want to add? All right, let's move on to scenario 1. Perfect. Okay. Tricky tradition. On an upcoming story about mental health and substance use disorder, a community media outlet in your collaborative wants to partner with their community in a non-traditional way by hiring a freelancer who has less journalism experience, but has experienced substance use disorder herself. The reporter develops interview questions, shares them with a source in advance, and asks one source to review a version of the story before it publishes. The source makes small changes for accuracy. When one of the legacy journalistic partners finds out about this, they are uneasy and concerned that the collaborative is not adhering to journalistic standards. The community media outlet is discouraged too, feeling like they'll never measure up. Okay. Next. All right, so group A, we want you to prioritize journalistic standards in your response. Agree that your collaborative must follow the highest journalistic guidelines to maintain credibility and dissuade the reporter from publishing the story because it was reviewed by a source in advance. Group B, we want you to look at this from a learning opportunity. You publish the story, then host a follow-up discussion to review the group's editorial guidances and discuss whether to revise them. And finally, Group C, we want you to embrace creativity. You publish the story with an editor's note describing why the outlet took this approach and share a first-person reflection from the freelancer of what they learned while reporting the story. Okay, I think, Joe, if you're ready, we can send people off into groups. So Group A, prioritize journalistic standards. Group B, a learning opportunity. And Group C, embrace creativity.
How long do you want to do for this again?
We're going to do 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okie doke.
Real quick.
Let's talk first, and then we'll throw the insights up.
Perfect. So, does anyone from Group 1 want to share on, why it's important to do prioritize those journalistic standards?
We can drop the spotlights and go to gallery view. Let's do that real quick so everybody can see each other. Go for it.
Should I say a little bit from Group 1?
Yes, that'd be great,
Okay.
Kevin. Thank you.
Let's see. We talked about how this upholding the journalistic standards is very important to maintain trust with our audiences as a collaborative and each entity within the collaborative. And I think someone else can jump in if I'm leaving things out, but I think we spent up most of the rest of the time talking about what else would have to be done within this response to support the journalist who wasn't sufficiently supported during the process as much as possible, and also to address what seems to have been a lack of communication or discussion about these standards before this incident. So we talked about how it might open the door to an interesting conversation among different editors because really we have an editor issue because the editor didn't work enough with this journalist or didn't make the standards clear. And then we have the reporter issue. So it could be an interesting conversation among editors to get people from different entities in the collaborative talking about challenges they've had and figuring out good ways to deal with them. And it might be a conversation in the leadership of the collaborative about how can we get these standards better understood and make them clearer. Talked about having, if there isn't a memorandum of understanding among the entities in the collaborative, it could be really important to make one and or improve it, make it clearer, get more people's eyes on it. Those are the kinds of things we discussed. And also if there are big news organizations in the collaborative and more community ones, making sure that there's awareness among the bigger organizations about the needs and types of content and types of collaborators that the community organizations need and want to have.
Great. And that's a perfect segue into Group 2 that looked at this as a learning opportunity and, kind of really diving into that discussion on editorial guidances. Anyone from Group 2 want to share what you discussed in your breakout?
I took notes and can share. So we talked about how collaboration is about learning, and when you're touching on sensitive subjects, sometimes you need to break rules. It's an opportunity to learn from others with different experiences. It's a good opportunity to invite the legacy partner to express more of what part of the standards are threatened by this approach. It could result in changes for the better in terms of how stories are reported and sourced. Also, publishing the story and then having this public conversation can reveal and show the public how it was good journalism, and the act of publishing will encourage the collaborative to continue.
Great. And finally, group 3, embrace creativity.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about what we discussed. One of the interesting points that kind of came out of it, and maybe we were leaning a little bit more towards option 2 by the end of our conversation, but we were talking about how it's important to establish guidelines first with all the collaborative members, and then you can have creative freedom to bend or push past those guidelines. But having that baseline understanding would have probably improved that process while also allowing for that creativity. And then another good point that someone in our group brought up was that readers might not know about this process that we're so familiar with as journalists. And by explaining that in an editor's note, that it might actually cause more confusion, or put up alarms that this is actually something that terribly wrong had happened in this article when it's maybe not, and maybe it was just some accuracy things that would have been fixed throughout the process anyway, ideally. So we were eventually talking about how maybe this is more of, we can allow this creativity to happen and these different ways of reporting to happen, but maybe it's going to be more of an internal relationship building fix than an external, here's why we did this explanation, if that makes sense. I think that's kind of some of the key takeaways we had.
Great, wonderful. All right, I'll turn it back over to Delaney, who will go into some of the insights, a lot of which you already talked about, and then we'll go into the next scenario.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, and thank you everyone for sharing. The good news is a lot of these insights are going to look and sound kind of familiar. We hit on a lot of them. So right, biggest insight here that I know a lot of people hit on, different outlets have different priorities, different outlets have different histories, different ways of connecting with their audience, right? So I heard a lot of folks talk about, understanding the relationships, right? Understanding like who's in the room. So that is always going to be really important, right? All these different voices are like the best part of collaborating, but they are also like the most common kind of challenge for project managers, right? Managing all of that. And then the other thing, I think people kind of started getting into this a little bit, think about the purpose of your collaborative. Just like every outlet is a little bit different, every collaborative is also a little bit different, especially as you're forming your identity as maybe a new entity or maybe a new way of working together. So maybe your collaborative is, used to communicating with their audience about what goes on behind the curtain, right? But maybe not. Maybe you're managing a collaborative that is more focused on, the straight news, the content production, the daily or weekly production. So your approach might change a little bit, right? Depending on your audience, your identity, and how you want to be sort of perceived. And then again, I know I heard this one in all the different breakout rooms, and I think especially with the discussion around MOUs, everything is a learning opportunity, right? So if you run into one of these situations, you might be saying to yourself, ooh, I think I need to document this, or ooh, this looks like an opportunity to expand this part of my MOU. So keep in mind, you will run into these challenges. They're inevitable, and every single one is going to be an opportunity for you to take that pause and say, what are we learning from this, and are we making changes? Also loved the point that a few folks made about training. So this is not just a learning experience for the project manager, but also a learning experience for the other members of the collaborative, right? I've heard some folks say maybe there's an opportunity for folks in the collaborative to get trained on covering certain issues or on things that they don't know. So great stuff. All right, so introducing our next scenario here. If you have not experienced this one, sorry to say, it is only a matter of time. The disproportionate participation problem. So for the purpose of this collaborative, we are going to imagine that you are managing a collaborative at the 1 year mark. for the purposes of this scenario, we are kind of talking about that 1 year mark as, you know, your collaborative has been working together, gelling, things are getting synthesized, and you as the project manager are really ready to take things to the next level. You want to do more, you want to do bigger, you want to do stronger, faster, better, etc. So as you get to this phase, right, where you want to start doing more, you realize that you have a few core members, right, that small central core, super involved at every meeting, pitching stories, coming up with ideas, raising their hands to, you know, run the table at the event. And then you have a few folks on the periphery. They're interested, but they're more just in an observing posture. You don't really see them at meetings. They're not really contributing to story brainstorm sessions, not really seeing them show up in whatever communication platform you're using, but they're still republishing stories, right, within the bounds of what is in your MOU. So like any good project manager, you are noticing people's, you know, feelings and perceptions before they become a problem, and you're not going to let them fester. So you are starting to notice that, you know, this core group is feeling a little bit resentful, right? They're excited, they're engaged, but they also feel like they're doing a lot. So like we said, any good project manager will not let this fester. So what do you do so that this does not derail all of your good progress? So group 1A, you are going to talk about outreach and engagement. Sit down one-on-one with those folks on the periphery. Maybe someone just hasn't asked them the right question. You're going to sit them down. You know, what do you need to get connected? What do you need to be more involved? What is holding you back? Right, group 2, option B, you are going to go with acceptance, right? Really encourage that core group, thank them for being so enthusiastic, and just accept that some of these folks are going to continue reaping the benefits without the exact same level of participation, keeping in mind that their republication of stories continues to expand your reach. Group 3, option C, you are going to discuss setting some boundaries, calling those folks on the edges and laying it out for them and saying, hey, I really need you in like 2 meetings a quarter if you're going to keep republishing the stories. Or come up with other ways for them to participate, whether it's meetings, story pitches, events, so that they can continue getting the benefits of their participation.
Perfect. All right, welcome back. So I'll get into insights in just a bit, but let's hear from someone from group 1. Want to share what you took away from outreach and engagement?
I'll do it this time in the interest of helping my group. We were all pretty glad to get number 1 and be able to be understanding and have one-on-one conversations to try to get to the root of what was going on rather than just point fingers and be draconian about it. So anyway, we had a couple people in our group who are going through this very thing. And Maeve said that she is doing scenario 1 and calling people and talking to them about it and seeing what else maybe other members of the collaborative can do to help the other organization based on whatever it might be that's holding them back. And was also talking about, you know, one of the reasons one of their groups wasn't able to participate was they had a new editor and some couple new green reporters, and they were able to pair those reporters up with more experienced reporters in the collaborative. So we're able to help each other through it. And then Sarah, who also leads a collaborative, was saying that it is good to try and talk with people and really find out what's going on so that you can deal with the actual situation. And one example she gave was they had a participant not showing up for any meetings, and it turned out that they had left the news organization and that's why they weren't showing up. So anyway, did I forget anything, group?
All right, perfect. Looks good. Group 2. Who wants to share? So group 2 is about acceptance. Think and encourage the core group. Anyone?
Where's everybody? Nobody wants to share. All right. I'll
Eric.
I'll share. In terms of acceptance, I think we all agreed, most of us agreed, I think, that you're never going to get 100% buy-in from any group. If you get a big enough group, people are going to disagree. And there'll be different levels of commitment. And so just accepting that and understanding that if you move forward, the folks who are bought in and who are putting in the work often reap rewards as a result of that work. And so I think, one, it's important that the collaboration is set up in a way that it's not benefiting all partners equally if all partners are not contributing equally. So I think that's that we don't talk about, or we haven't talked about in terms of structure. You don't want folks just riding coattails of other individuals in the group where there's only a small handful doing all the work. But on the flip side of that, those who are doing the work should reap some sort of benefit and recognition. And that often serves as encouragement to the folks on the sidelines for them to become more participatory. Anybody else in group 2 think, did I miss anything from our discussion? No, pretty good. All right.
All right.
If I may add, I think one of the missing piece in the discussion is the power dynamics among the group. In my own experience, managing the center's ethnic and community media initiatives, the acceptance often comes from the dominant group, which essentially it becomes not a shared vision with all the collaborators, and in some ways it fails. It's one of the reasons why collaboration fails. The acceptance always comes from the group that has better resources or somehow canonized to be the ones who are doing the work better than the other collaborators. So I think the power dynamics there is very apparent, but it's always not being discussed.
Great, thank you. Group 3. Boundaries.
Yeah, I can go. Hey y'all, I'm Clarissa Brooks. I work at Reckon News, which is a part of AMG, and I am the strategic partnerships editor there. And so this felt really apt for me, at least, and for our group, because boundaries is a big part of the work I do. I gave the example of we have a column at Reckon called Black Joy, where we work with the Black ice cream shop, and they were just kind of falling behind on the deliverables that we had. So we had to just set some really clear boundaries of, hey, if you're not sending out emails or like promoting this properly, then we have to, push back our deadlines or like cut the project short and like not do as much with this project as we want to. And so being able to like just track the lack of communication and then share it with my manager and the editor-in-chief was really important, just so that things feel equal and reciprocal when it comes to partnerships work. I think the other thing that we discussed in the group is the difference between partnerships and collaborations, and that collaborations feel more community-oriented and focused on needs and like coverage as a equity project, and partnerships are a bit more transactional. So yeah, hopefully I covered everything that we talked about in that space.
That was great, thank you. And I love that reflection on partnerships versus collaborations and thinking about the community and the work we're doing. I'm gonna let Delaney share the screen again, but go ahead and kind of touch on the insights that you all shared. It kind of touches on the same thing we talked about in the first scenario with what you do up front. So thinking about one-on-one conversations, those guidelines, those guideposts that we set up in the beginning, as was said from some of the breakouts, if partners don't see the value in collaboration, these conversations are much, much harder. Spending that time up front is really, really important in building a strong collaboration. Also think about, we talked about different levels, but also thinking about different kinds of collaboration, identifying the strengths, be flexible and sensitive to what and how people are able to contribute. Perhaps, do an asset list or survey in the beginning where you're identifying what each collaborative partner might be able to bring to the table. Capacities are different among different newsrooms and non-newsroom partners. So in being thoughtful about our time, we're getting really, really close. That flew by. I hope we had really good conversations, but I'm going to turn it over to Delaney for the next scenario. I think we're just going to breeze through this quickly so you get a sense of it. And then we'll share some final takeaways and what to expect next.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And yes, like Chris said, I was looking at the clock around 2:30 and I thought, wow, 45 whole minutes left. This is great. And then, I blinked and here we are. So, yeah, so there's one that we wanted to end with, really common. We've run into this with so many collaboratives, so many project managers, the paywall. Some people love it, some people hate it, but wherever you stand on it, this will come up in a lot of collaboratives, especially if you're working with legacy newsrooms or corporate-owned partners. So, really common way that this plays out is you're getting into your story plans, you're getting into your processes, and someone says, whoa, 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 slow down. My organization has a paywall. I am never going to be able to get this republication clause in the MOU past them. We gotta, hump the brakes. So this will happen a lot. So these are some of the different ways that we have, seen folks go about it, or, different kind of scenarios that you might see this play out in. The first one is connect and compromise. This one, I will share, I am not a journalist. So the first time I ran into this, when I was helping a collaborative get set up, they said, I can't do this because of the business side. And I just immediately said, like, can I talk to your business side? Right. Which had not really been done before, but it was, ended up being a success. But so yeah, maybe you need to just sit down with the folks who are sort of holding firm on this. I also can't tell you how many newsrooms will say, I can't do this because of the business side. And then when everyone sits down with the business side, you're able to come to an understanding a lot faster, just when everyone is sort of in the room focused on the same goal. Another thing here is, you might have to reevaluate the fit. If you're in a collaborative that's really prioritizing, keeping stories in front of the paywall, really prioritizing sharing stories freely, and there's an outlet that just can't get past it philosophically, you may need to sit down with them and talk about whether this is a good time, or whether maybe there's another way for them to be involved. The last one, is just pick your battles. Picking battles is a really important skill for project managers. And hey, maybe this is one of them, and maybe you just want to say, I can't force this partner to change their business practices. As with all of these, there are pros and cons to all of them. And yeah, also, so I know that these conversations can get, frustrating really quickly. And so it's really easy to say, why can't you do this? Why don't you just get it, right? Why can't you just see it this way? Why can't you just do what we need to do? Keep that inside, maybe try a different question, like, how can we come together on this? Or what is this really about? I bring that one up because often these disagreements that seem really simple are sometimes masking something a little bit deeper. So don't be afraid to, pull it back and say, like, hey, is this really about something else? Again, this is one of my kind of famous quips that everyone who has worked with me has heard more times than they probably have wanted to. It's less about what problems you encounter and more about how you solve those problems, right? So we're talking about a paywall here, but disagreements can emerge over anything. So it's how you respond, right? How you work through it and what norms and lessons your group takes from this disagreement. That's the really important stuff, right? Problems are problems. Problem solving is sort of where the magic happens. All right, if you want more of these, you are in luck. We have a little mini guidebook coming out very, very shortly, today or tomorrow. It will include additional scenarios. It will also include all of these scenarios with a little bit more detail. It'll be set up the same way with scenario, the different options, and then the insights. So that one has, I think we have 10 scenarios in that one that you can look forward to. That will go to everyone in this group, and then it will also be on our website and our learning lab. And yeah, thank you all so much for this whirlwind discussion and all of the really good conversations. So now we will spend the rest of the time with questions.
All right, folks, you can unmute or you can raise your hand with the raise hand feature, or you can drop your question in the chat if you don't want to unmute, and we'll do our best to get to you. If no one has any off the bat, I have a few. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, Clarissa, I saw your hand first. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. So like I said, I work in strategic partnerships at my publication. And so I think the thing I'm running into is maybe a question about strategy, and also just about, I think, like the actual managing of the project. So for context, I do a lot of either really big long-term partnerships where it's like we're reporting with a publication for months on end, or we're doing smaller things where it's like, we'll promote on social or we'll promote in a newsletter. And so, yeah, I guess I just wanted to hear from folks about how they're scaling their partnerships work. I think for me, I'm, not really finding that balance because I am the first person to have this role. So of course, being the only person in the department is just illogical. But yeah, but would really just love to hear how other folks are really managing the load of that as publications are new to partnerships and collaborations. It's been really fruitful. We've been able to do really cool stuff, but it's hard to like articulate to my publication that this is impactful, even if like the numbers aren't as exciting as they'd like to see. So would just love commentary on that.
Chris, I'm looking at you because you have a lot of experience with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think one is having regularity in how often the group gets together. I think that's really important, whether you've got a small project going on or a large project going on. I always tell other project managers too, there's always this lull after a big project. Delaney has witnessed this from me. Like you're a cheerleader as a project manager. That's a big part of your role. And any size collaborative gets really excited when something great happens and you're done. And then it's just like, whew, everybody just drops. And so part of the role is to kind of re-engage, bring back, like, what did we learn? What were the outcomes? What can we do next time? What should we take on? What are the questions that our community still has? Like, how can we take this onto the next project? So it is kind of just constantly being that like beating heart behind a collaborative. And I've found like having some guides, like some templated guides of how each project goes, helps carry the collaborative forward into what's next on the plate. Delaney, anything else you want to add to that, or anyone else? Feel free to hop on too.
Yeah, I mean, big template fan over here. So second that.
And I'll say, we talked about how collaboratives are growing constantly. My template grows constantly. So, with each project, we learn something, and that gets added to what that template looks like, be it notes or comments for the next project. But we're constantly learning from ourselves. And that practice has also helped us address conflict when it arises, because the collaborative partners also see it as a learning process. And so it helps eliminate some anger that might otherwise flare up, if they think, well, because it shows each partner we're listening, we're all learning, we're all growing together, and it makes it collaborative in nature as well. I hope that helped, Clarissa. Okay, I think Tracy next.
Yeah, that last scenario that Delaney talked about raised a question for me, which is, and I'm at the Adirondack Explorer. I'm trying to put a collaborative together of upstate newsrooms and other partners around climate change. And we've met several times. We're not actually up and running yet. So anyway, my question is, if one of the partners, or I don't, is there something else that collaboratives do together that I don't understand how somebody could be part of it if they're not willing to share the work that's being done. So I was wondering what else comes out of a collaborative if it's not projects and stories that get shared and published.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two things here. One thing is with, and I think I might have misspoken a little bit. Sometimes what we see with, outlets that are like not ready to fully commit is that maybe they want to stay like connected informally to the collaborative, and there might be another time and place where they want to come back in. That's actually fairly common. Not even just with legacy outlets. Like sometimes there are just outlets who say, hey, this isn't quite like the right time and place, but can you kind of like keep me on the listserv? Can we have, Zoom tea like in 3 months, and like, can you come back to me? So that was like that can happen, and that is normal and fine as long as those like modes of communication are sort of comfortable for everyone.
Right.
So that can happen. As far as, what can you do other than stories? I'll start this, and then I'll have Chris kind of add anything that comes to mind for him. But, we've seen collaboratives do events together. We've seen collaboratives get together for audience engagement or audience listening activities. We just have, I don't think anyone in that collaborative is here. We have a collaborative in Central Pennsylvania that spent a year working on a theater production. One of their non-news partners was a theater troupe, and they sort of spent, and this, I keep, telling people this is like a longer, bigger commitment kind of thing, but they spent, a chunk of time on developing a theatrical performance based on some of the journalism that they had done. So, I mean, we always encourage people to, kind of think big, or think about maybe like what resources you have in your community that could just be a new way to reach someone, or a new way to kind of represent those stories. So those are just a couple examples, of things that you can do sort of besides stories. But Chris, anything you would add to those?
Well, I'll add a clarification on the stories too. I mean, so this happened with our collaborative. We have different types of stories that the collaborative shares. So we have some stories that are going to be done no matter what by those news outlets on our topic that the collaborative is focused on, which is affordable housing. Each partner is able to share those stories throughout the collaborative if they choose, and partners are able to republish those if they choose. Then we have stories that the collaborative pays for or supports financially in some way, be it individually or big collaborative projects. Those always get shared in front of a paywall by all the partners, just like any other sponsored or supported through philanthropy projects would probably. So I think, going back to Delaney's question of like, how can we make this work is a good starting point, because it's not always that it just won't work. It's how do we make this fit within the model that you have? And I'll say, our partners that have paywalls, or the main partner that has a paywall, we have had instances where the public wants to read a story that's behind a paywall that was written outside of collaborative funding. The collaborative can often republish that story on our collaborative website. So there's ways that they are able to be a good partner for the community for stories they want to hear. I've made PDFs for folks and sent them out to community members. I've printed stories and taken them to people before. So it's thinking differently about how these things happen and how community facing the collaborative might be.
Thank you.
And I think Sarah, you're next, and then Jill.
Yeah, thanks. I've been managing a collaborative, an education reporting collaborative that combines both local and national outlets for a little over 2 years. And I think what I was looking for some advice or feedback on is kind of how, as a project manager, I can encourage us to kind of take it to the next level. Like, I'm really, really proud of what all of the members have done. But we kind of default to something where we agree on a topic and then everybody contributes a story, sometimes kind of retrofitting something they were already working on to make it work. And so I'm just would love ideas for how I can make the case to try and do some more genuine collaboration that might involve more upfront planning specific to just the collaboration, but could really pay off in the long run in terms of the project's impact.
I can start here, Delaney. I don't know how the collaborative meets, and if they're all in one geographic area. They're not. They're spread out. So even virtual, I would still say schedule a strategic type meeting among the collaborative members. That's not kind of every week business or everyday business, like really kind of an ideation time to talk about what are the needs of the community, how can this collaborative serve those needs, and like what do we want to be the outcome from the work we're doing, and getting people to think about that outcome first, and then let them, and with your guidance, kind of guide them, lead them to like how do we work together to make this outcome happen. With the CJC, we meet virtually for most of our meetings, but we have 2 meetings each year that are half day and in person. Geographically, that's a lot easier for us to do than a national or regional collaborative. But I would start there, like by having kind of dedicated time to not talk about an individual project, but to really work together around kind of ideation of what a collaborative can accomplish. When we had those conversations, we realized that one of the biggest strengths in our collaborative was creative, that we were able to do things that those newsrooms normally could not do alone. And that has guided us to, we've done art, we've done a graphic novel. We're doing another project with some arts funding. We've worked with local artists. We've hosted events that, at, public kind of gatherings of housing advocacy organizations, things like that normally those newsrooms would not be able to do on their own. Delaney, do you want to share any other examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sarah, what this makes me think of is, kind of like a question that we sort of pose to collaboratives when they're getting started, but it's, I think, a good question to ask sort of like repeatedly at different points, right? Which is like, what's keeping people in your community up at night? Or like, what is the thing that everyone wants to solve that no one seems to be able to crack, right? And then start from there, right? Like, how can we then address that together? Because I've been in so many origination meetings where we've asked that question and people come to consensus like so quickly, right? Like people all know what the answer to that question is. I think even if you're looking at a national project, if it's topic bound, I think you're still going to get like really quick consensus from folks on kind of what the intractable issue is. And sometimes that can just sort of revitalize the way that people think about working together if they, think about something that they just really haven't been able to do on their own. That can be another way to sort of frame that question, right? What are you not able to do on your own that you think you might be able to do in collaboration with someone else? So sometimes it is about, and I know this came up before, it's about using like a pause or like a lull between projects to kind of return to these like blue sky questions about what folks really want to accomplish. So that's just what comes to mind for me, again, just having been in a lot of conversations like that, but also, yeah, this sounds like a great time to work on like an asset list or an asset map, right? And, understanding what are the kind of the, interesting or unusual strengths that you have in your particular group, and are you using them, and how could you use them? That's what I would add.
And real quick, for the collaboratives that are made up mostly of publishers, bring in your reporters or give them a space to meet as well. A lot of our really cool collaborations on like joint reporting efforts have happened from our reporter meetings where they find that kind of camaraderie and opportunities to work together, and they build, stronger relationships too. And Jill, and then, yep, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Delaney, those questions are super helpful. Thank you for that. My question, I'd love to get some insight on when is the right time to start a collaborative. We have our local newspaper where I used to work has been really decimated. So there are several local journalists in town have started very small startups, all started by solid local journalists, but they're teeny tiny and brand new and not very well funded yet. Is this the time to start something when they're fledgling and may not make it, or is it better to wait until everybody has roots and has found their lane and has a clear idea of what's going to work and how they're going to do it?
Delaney, I love your answer in the chat.
Yeah, Joe, really quick, like there'll never be a perfect time. I mean, you can ask me that as someone who helped catalyze like 4 collaboratives in spring 2020. Like there's no perfect time. So if you are waiting for the perfect time, I'm giving you permission to like release yourself from that. But and I will say too, we've worked in a lot of communities that have experienced like a loss of news, and that can be like a very reinvigorating time for people. I do always tell people like that can be that can like really sorry, my AirPods died. That can also be a time where people are really experiencing a lot of pain. So that's just something to be aware of if you are, starting a project like this during like a tumultuous time. Just, don't ignore that, I would say. But yeah, it's, there's no perfect time. But Chris, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about like the timeline and kind of the evolution from your side.
Yeah. I also think there's opportunity to start small. Maybe it is around a certain project or perhaps part of the collaborative addresses that need. So is there skills sharing that can take place among these new startups and possibly legacy organization? Like, is there some additional benefit that can come from the collaborative that makes this time even more important for that budding those budding news organizations in the community? Our collaborative, Delaney was there actually in the start. COVID actually made us stronger. Our smaller organizations actually started benefiting more because of the way our structure was set up. So it actually, didn't seem like a good time, but it actually kind of strengthened the collaborative because we addressed the needs that were happening at the time, and we formed a kind of stronger news community. So I think anytime's the right time, and just acknowledging what those needs are and how the collaborative can also serve those needs as well as the needs of the community.
Thank you.
And Joe, do we have time for one more? I saw one more hand go up.
I don't see why not. If everybody's down to stick around,
okay.
We got 20 people on the call. If they're down to stick around, and go for it.
All right. And Shia or Shia, you're muted.
Hi, Shia. Oh, sorry. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep, go for it.
Yeah. So my project is a little bit different than newsroom to newsroom collaborating, although there is some of that happening. It's newsrooms and journalism programs collaborating with a couple other organizations and libraries and things like that, doing solutions journalism and complicating the narrative framework. And we're training the students to do the stuff, sort of the strongest pieces will be surfaced and sent to the radio stations and they'll air. And my issue right now is sort of, I'm trying to make it a manageable ask for professors to integrate into their courses, for the newsrooms to integrate into their workflow and not have, news holes and whatnot. And in doing so, I think I probably didn't plan quite as much sort of like organizing meetings among the people, the main head of collaborators. And I've done a lot of like, hey, I really want it to be tailored to what their needs are, but I also don't want to, I'm also really mindful of not wanting to push too much to have them, mandate that they come a certain amount of time. So my question is sort of, if there are strategies other than just saying, hey, I'm having a conversation for those of you who want to join, repeatedly about how to do this better, so that I can better tailor what resources I'm offering and the parameters of it and what's working and what's not to these individual schools and stations. So I guess just any thoughts or feedback on that would be useful.
I'll start with just think about the tools you're using. Meetings are important. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. Think about the tools you're using. Meetings are important, but also think about the ways people access the collaborative outside of those meetings. Don't try to overcomplicate it. Not everybody uses Slack. If your group doesn't use Slack, don't try to. And this is actually in the guidebook on like the Slack question. But I mean, sometimes it's just setting up a Google Doc that has some of those notes from those meetings, like kind of flowing through, so that it engages people in between those points of interaction and keeps the collaborative growing, I think. Especially working across newsroom, non-newsroom partners. I think it's a great way to, it's how to keep people engaged throughout the process as you're starting to build those relationships. Yes. Google Docs, Google Sheet, like whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's what works for your group of people.
Yeah,
And by the way, libraries are excellent partners.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, I do want to
best.
shout that out. Libraries have been such like great, generative, creative partners in a lot of our collaboratives. And they're also really great convening spaces. Even if you're not literally getting people to meet at the library, libraries are like trusted institutions in a lot of places, and they're familiar institutions and often have familiar people involved with them or working at them. So they are just a really great starting point for getting folks together, right? Sometimes folks who are like wary of meeting at the newsroom will meet you at the library. So definitely, shout out to libraries as that sort of trusted convening space. And I think also, Shia, with you specifically working with the complicating the narratives work, sometimes this can be an opportunity to do a little bit of like matchmaking, right? We talk about this a lot, but it can also be helpful in the beginning, right? Kind of pairing folks up. If you're talking to the radio station and they really want to do a Spanish language piece and they haven't been able to make it work yet. Maybe you want to introduce the folks at the radio to the folks at the Spanish language digital startup, and maybe they want to meet and maybe they want to use the 22 questions, right? Like, so sometimes there's a little bit of that behind the scenes, like grouping or pairing of people in smaller groups to build those relationships so that when folks come into a bigger meeting, it can feel less overwhelming, for the folks who are sort of still like getting the hang of it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the libraries hosted our community engagement events at the different communities. So that's, they were like a great local trusted source to help do that. So thank you so much.